Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon. Before we begin, I'm going to run through a couple of key points before I hand you over to our moderator for today. As participants, you have all entered the webinar muted. If you would like to ask any questions, you can do this through the question box that you will see on the side panel. You can include your name as well as the name of your association so we know who we are speaking to. Our participants will answer all of your questions during the Q&A session at the end. Just before this session, you will be asked to take part in 2 short polls to discuss during our Q&A session. It is important to note that this webinar is actually being recorded and will be shared with all participants after the event. If you do not wish to have your name or association mentioned, please do not include this information when you are asking a question. Finally, please feel free to share your thoughts with us on social media, especially our Twitter account. Now, finally, I will hand you over to Miguel Gaspar Silva, who will be our moderator for today. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you very much, Lena, and thank you everyone for coming to our session today. It is really a privilege to have many attendees and obviously our speakers today participating in this very interesting webinar. So as Lena said, my name is Miguel Gaspar Silva. I'm Vice President of the Esmig Association, and obviously I also have my normal job, which is being Global Head for the Utilities IBU at SAP. Now again, welcome everyone to this, I think, super interesting webinar and session that we are going to have today, with the title of Access to Energy Data, right? We focus on innovative services for empowered consumers in the energy transition. And obviously, we are very honored, right, for having multiple speakers, starting by Antonio Colino, that will be a speaker and will also be making the introduction to this session, followed by Tig O'Brien, that is then taking over the keynote speech. And before giving it over to you, Antonio, and then you passing it over to Tig, then I would just quickly say a few words about both of you. So Antonio Colino is an industrial engineer. He is currently the CEO of Alder Energia for Spain and Portugal, and obviously is here in the quality of President of the European Energy Retailers Association, the first European network of national associations of independent energy retailers. Antonio, as I said, will make the introduction of the session, and then it will be followed by the keynote speech that will be delivered by Tig. Tig O'Brien is the Deputy Head for the Unit for Consumers Local Initiatives, Just Transition at DG ENER, that European Commission. Since 2019, he has been managing policy development and implementation related to the European Green Deal, notably on energy consumers and the just transition. So this would be my first introduction, giving it over to you, Antonio, to take over the introduction of the entire session today. And obviously then we will be following up on the upcoming speakers and items in the agenda that we have.
Okay, thank you very much, Miguel. Big pleasure to be with all of you. Good afternoon, good morning for some Spanish still, because 3 p.m. is still, we couldn't even start lunch now. You know, we are weird on that. But no, I think the webinar we have today, it's very interesting. You know, we do have a very good lineup of panelists, no, and also be able to co-host this event, no, together with Esmig, also BNE, you know, and have also the participation with Smarten, no, and of the Commission, no, with that. I think it's very interesting, and especially today, no, I think there's something, no, we're going to speak about volume, no, and consumption, and so, no, and we're thinking about saving the customer some money, no, and the consumer has to save, and well, these times, no, a lot of times when we think on saving in the customer, no, especially this last month, especially today, no, we're thinking on the price, no, a lot of times about the price is the issue, the price is an issue, no, and I mean today it's pure trending topic about price things and prices, and so the truth is that what a customer pays for his energy is price per consumption. So there are 2 variables there, and sometimes the press and all the debate goes much more towards price and towards consumption. And when we see historically what a consumer can do with the price, well, it's a little bit more out of their hands. No, and okay, the commission can put a set of tools and the governments can do things, but at the end, when I look to the past, energy final price to consumer has been growing, no, for different aspects, no, because the regulated part, because the non-regulated part, because taxes and so on. If I look, for example, the case of Spain, we are speaking about in the last decade from is being growing more than 100%, the price of the final price for consumer, no, for different things. So if we show consumers to be very effective in their price strategy in changing retailers or making new type of contracts, yes, he can save 5–10%, no, but that would mean that instead of 100% more, he's only paying 90% more. And if he does it very good, he's going to pay 105% more. But so price is something out of their control, no, and we're seeing it especially these days. So it's consumption, no, what it's the key where a consumer can really act. And if a consumer learns to save 20–30% of their consumption, that's something that he's saving forever because it's out of his consumption, no? So it's much more important and much more resilient in the long term to think on the consumption. To see and work on your consumption, the first thing is having access to the data, no? And understanding what you're consuming, when, how, and what you can do, where that's coming from. So that's why I think this webinar is very interesting, especially today we're speaking about the Q of the formula. No, it's looks like something, well, now the main problem is the price, but we need to work on the Q because we will have price peaks again in the future. And the consumers that understand what they are consuming, when, what, and they have the timely information to be able to be empowered and really use that information to reduce their consumption and use it in the hours where it's cheaper, no? Then that's going to be in the long term much more sustainable for the consumer, no? So I think it is very good. It looks we're like weird guys speaking about consumption today instead of price, but for sure Tade will speak a little bit about prices because it's going to be a need, and if not, they're going to ask him for sure. But well, I think it's good also to remember a lot of times that hey, you pay price per consumption. Don't forget about one part because you can act only on one of them. So let's have the information. Let's have the webinar. Thank you, everybody, and I'll just leave the floor to Tarek so he can do the starting of everything. Okay, thank you very much.
Very good. Tarek, if you want to take it over, thank you so much. You are muted, I believe, Tarek.
Of course I am. So first of all, thank you for the very nice introductions. Thank you as well for setting up the anticipation, Antonio. I think though, if you really want to understand what the Commission has to say, I can recommend one of two things. You know, of course, go straight to see what the Commissioner said in our speech today, if you really want to get the political headlines, or you can even read communication. And I will try to say a few words about it as well. I'm not telling you not to listen to me. I'm just saying today we're going to try to focus on bringing all things together. But as I do that, I think I will come back to this communication today again, and we will, and this sits in the background. This idea of what do we do about prices and price spikes. So the first point, as I was saying, is what's the context for actually for everything that we're doing? And the context is that we are under this Commission managing, but in general, as the economy going through, or we need to go through two major transitions at the same time. Fortunately, because they actually complement each other if done right, which is we have the twin energy and digital transitions.
Mm-hmm.
So these go very deeply to how our economies and societies operate, and they work with each other. And what we need is, and going back to what the Commission has set as its political objectives for these 5 years, for this term, is to manage this and to deliver on to make sure that we have a European Green Deal, that we transform ourselves into a low carbon economy, and that we are fit for the digital age and the use of things. Now, when last year we looked at, well, what does this actually mean for the energy system, as opposed to just looking at the the enormity of the European Green Deal. When we look at this, at the energy system itself, the more we looked at it, it was like we pulled everything together inside the Directorate General. We said it's actually about system integration, energy system integration. And that is where you bring all the different parts of the energy system together and you make them work. And you make them work in a way that is integrated, that responds to the needs of different parts. And we'll come back to this, but this very much includes the linkages between energy consumption and production. And that as well was also linked to the ability to do that is driven by the digitalization, by the presence, by the use of digital tools. So what you see when we promised, what we committed to last year was to have a system-wide digitalization of energy action plan to accelerate the implementation of digital solutions and the integration of energy systems. So it brings these two things together. And I don't want to, there's many parts of the energy system integration paper that's not for me to talk about now. But that's also tied to the objective of creating new opportunities for consumers to reduce their energy bill and to participate actively in the market. Now, what this in some respects does is it takes forward the work that we were doing in the clean energy package and really realizes that and makes it real. And the vision that we have that lies at the center of the clean energy package, putting the consumer at the heart of the energy system. So in this year, we had the Fit for 55 package. So and I think we sometimes are told not to call it that anymore, because when I was back home, I even saw an ad for Fit for 50, which was distinctly aimed at people who are over 50 to do yoga and sports. And this one is maybe not quite the same thing, but we all know in this world, I think the people who don't understand that we mean getting the system, getting it ready for the emission reductions that we're talking about. Now, that's not over yet. We could, many people think, okay, 55 we did in July. Actually, there's part twos to come on that. We have more to come on buildings. We have more to come on gas and gas decarbonization, which will include provisions also for energy consumers. But I mean, we can take it for now that a lot of what we'll talk about today is very largely based about the electricity system, and I'm going to focus on electricity today rather than gas or even renewables per se, although they sit in the background very much as being that we're trying to talk about local production, So that's what we are. That's where we were all happily doing until as we went on our summer holidays in August this year. And I picked that because, and then when we came back from our summer holidays, and what did we face? And I think we can go to the next slide. And we can, here we are. Sorry, excuse me, I saw that you did. By October 2021, we are all our energy is being taken up with what on earth are we going to do about these price rises? And I mean, of course, we can walk and chew gum, we can do two things, but the amount of energy that we have to do this now, actually, when everybody was back on holidays, and I was in holidays in Ireland, country I know quite well, but wouldn't have mattered. I was in Germany too. You started hearing, hang on, there's things coming through in the news, even though you're not. What's this? I don't normally hear about energy markets in the news. What's happening here? And I think everybody came back in late August and said, what? Something's bubbling here. And if you're in Spain, it was even more so. If you're in other countries, even more so. But everywhere, suppliers were announcing price increases. There was little things calling, like, we're not sure about our, I'm thinking of Ireland now, our security supply situation. And basically, right throughout September, it became clear this was a major issue with potentially very significant effects. And I think, and I don't want to suggest that we weren't doing it, because that wouldn't be true. It became clear that we have to, at all stages, link today with tomorrow, which is, it's not just enough. We don't just spend, the Green Deal is not just talking about 2030 or 2050. It's also about what we're doing today and managing that. And if we forget that, well, actually, it's the old thing. We don't look after your bread and butter issues, then you're going to have a big problem. Now, that's one of the reasons why the Commission was actually able to quite rapidly, I hope you don't find too many typos in the communication, because are some, but the Commission was able to quite rapidly come together with a communication that was ready to set out how we can address these energy price rises. And you could even say largely ready very quickly, and you have to add in the inter-service process, but this was ready. We knew the kinds of ways that we could think about this, and that, because within the internal market rules and within the things, we don't have to completely reinvent the wheel, and we'll come back to some of this in a moment, is that we can act. This is a very important point. We can act to protect consumers. We can act to protect the internal market, by which I mean that we don't just diverge. I think we shouldn't say and talk about that as protecting the market just as an objective in itself. It's so that we don't diverge into a same thing where everybody does their own thing in an uncoordinated way and doesn't undermines each other. And we can do it in a way that meets our climate ambitions. So this toolbox today, published today, presented by the Commission, basically says there are immediate measures we can take to support consumers and industry. We don't have to undermine the market to do that. We don't have to undermine the ability to cooperate together to do that. We can provide emergency support for consumers, and there's many tools we can do use of that. And actually, there are funds flowing into the member states to address vulnerable consumers through the ETS already. So we can almost, say to member states, you can reflect the kinds of things we have proposed to do with the Climate Social Fund for the expansion of the ETS, or having an ETS for other sectors. We can investigate the potential for anti-competitive behavior into possible speculation. We have tools, competition tools, market tools. We can provide aid within the framework to consumers. So we have the ability to act quickly within that. Now, at the same time, and here I think you will see this comes right through the text, as we say, okay, that allows us to deal with the immediate situation, with the P, for want of a better way of putting it, because, and I was very taken by that, and I've noted down what Antonio said about the P and the Qs. I mean, I don't want to go into a treatise on monetary economics, but what's changeable in the short term, what's changeable in not so short term. But right now, today, I think today is possibly not possible. You can make a dent on it, but when you see changes in Qs, it's often a sign, or certainly when I hear about it in the newspaper, it's people saying, "Oh, I've had to shut down my heating because it's too expensive." And that's not the kind of changes that's not the kind of change in behavior that we're looking for. Is for people to be cold. That's the wrong kind of change. So what we have to say is, like, actually, no, we can change the Q. How? Well, we have the tools. We have the tools in the internal market tools that we developed, in the clean energy package tools and the electricity tools that are there. We want to empower the consumer. So insofar as we haven't succeeded in doing that yet, or it's always a thing, we're going, we should do it. And so that basically means that we want to boost the role of consumers in the energy market by empowering them. We have multiple ways, different ways of doing this: innovative services, new demand response opportunities, new possibilities to act, whether it's through energy communities or so on. But basically, this idea of we empower consumers and we put them at the center of the system. And at the same time, when we're going to have a study, we're going to look at the possibility for increased integration of retail and energy markets to give choice and competition to European consumers. But that's necessarily a longer term project. Maybe I'll come back to that again, because actually that is something that will build on some of the issues that I'm going to mention later about detailed interoperability acts and so on. So now I'm just going to switch on to look at this digitalization of energy action plan, because actually this will be a key part of our medium-term measures to address the kinds of issues that have been raised, that we're dealing with today, so that at least we're more resilient to them if they arise again. Right, so we can go to the next slide, and please tell me if I'm going on too long. So we have the plan for a digitalization of energy action plan, and there's a couple of things I want to put about it. It's like, basically, we can talk about the nice words that it's creating synergies and so on, but basically it's bringing together these two transitions that I talked about at the beginning. So the two key objectives of this commission. It's the one part, and obviously each one has their own ones. Now, we want to support the investment in digital infrastructure, and it's going to have multiple ways in which it can work. And one of the things that we are going to pick up on as part of this is this idea of building on a common European energy data space, which is the objective that has been set out already by the Commission, but really led by a different DG, by DG Connect. So here are the key scopes and objectives of it. But maybe we can go to the next one, is just look at the 5 areas that are sitting there, and we look at which ones are particularly relevant for us and for the discussions we're having today. We want to empower consumers, and want to ensure cybersecurity and data protection, which is an absolute starting place. You get this idea that you can share data, and you've got a clarity about who knows and who uses what, and that you encourage the uptake of digital technology. And I think this means both by TSOs and DSOs, but actually by the households. And we're going to have, we're sitting here at a link that comes through all the parts of the energy system, from production and management of major solar farms that are distributed generation, but also through to management of household consumption. And that's why it's going to be a tool for empowering consumers, for allowing them, or giving them new tools that they can actually do it. Why? Because nobody wants to manage their energy system to be like somebody from the Matrix, sitting in front of a series of data with prices coming down, actually even more volatile, is not maybe a bad word here, but more volatile prices, saying now's the time to turn on my dishwasher, or now's the time to start heating this part of the house. No, that's not going to work. No, that's not how we work. It has to be automated in a way that a consumer controls. And maybe we can go on to the next slide then. So what do we mean when we say we want to create a European data sharing infrastructure? Well, this infrastructure is ultimately about creating a platform for new market services to develop. So we will value the demand side flexibility. So we know we want to do that. And I'm not going to give you another discussion about why demand side flexibility is important. We start off with the assumption that we all understand it, and to help integration of renewables. Well, what are we going to do that? So what we want to do there is to build on this, as I mentioned already, the objective to develop a European energy data space, and at the same time to develop the interoperability framework. Now, this interoperability framework, and this is what I'm going to come back to at the end of it when we get quite into the detail, this is the idea that was provided for in the electricity directive, in the European, sorry, excuse me, in the clean energy package, so that we would have the data that's created within the energy system, within the electricity system, excuse me, that is created, that we can use it in different parts. I mean, so if you want to say, well, what is our ultimate objective? And I put this as the ultimate objective here now, is to say, if I have a good data service, I have a good energy service that I develop in Germany, then I can offer it in Slovenia as well. And the question is, well, why can't you do it now? Well, you can't do it because there are many reasons. That's why I come back to the study I mentioned at the beginning. Oh, sorry, in terms of today's communication. Well, there's many reasons, but one of them is actually just simple standardization type issues. And here, this is what the Commission and what the European Union does very well, is it's able to bring everybody along to the same place, providing a platform for them to talk and find a common approach to these things that addresses the issues. Can we go to the next slide, please? And then I've only picked out 2 of the issues. What we want to do, what we want is that the consumers are active in the energy transition. So what we want to ensure is that data-driven energy services, that they have consumers' benefits and rights at their core. Now, sometimes this is presented as being in tension with somehow a network operator review center. But I'm going to tell a story very quickly about when I was working on, it's almost 10 years ago now, but when I was working on the demand connection code and the proposal from ENSO-E at the time, and they were, being good engineers, they proposed the idea that we would have frequency response in fridges. They gave me loads of stuff about why this is the best engineering solution, and I believe it, I understand it. But the problem was that it raised up such opposition before it even hit my desk as a mere policy officer in the Commission, that it was on the front of the Bild Zeitung in Germany, and we had a German commissioner at the time. And I spent more time dealing with that than I did trying to get the solutions on the thing. So what we have to be able to do is to show how this benefits consumers and put them at the center. Now I'll flip on to the next slide and just tell you that there's loads of stuff here. I encourage everybody to be involved in the consultation that exists at the moment on the Digitalization of Energy Action Plan. I'm sure the people listening today and participating today have lots of very good things and interesting things to say. So what we see here is we've closed the roadmap. We've put the roadmap out for its own consultation. We've launched the public consultation. Now we're reaching out to you as part of this. Thank you. And in January, the public consultation will close. So now we need to, in the first half of next year, draft the action plan. So this is only one part of this progress, but I've said to you what it is that I don't think I said anything that would be seen as prejudicing the Commission. So now let's engage. Now I want to go to one other thing here, and I've mentioned this several times, which is the idea of interoperability and using the legislative or the implementing tools that the Commission has. So now we've started from me talking about the objectives of this Commission, and now we're right down with one of the implementing acts. But I'm glad some of you anyway have stayed with me for this slight journey through how the Commission achieves its objectives. If we can go to the next slide. So apologies for the thing here. Well, this EG1, I should have updated this and thing. This is a recommendation from a part of the Smart Grid Task Force that they gave us in 2019. So related to the implementation, the transposition of the directive, of what we should be doing with these implementing acts, this empowerment that we have that I mentioned earlier in the electricity directive to try to achieve a harmonization or an interoperability of data requirements. So here are some of the things here. So what we have to do is here we have to pick out what's happening, the low-flying fruit, low hanging fruit, sorry, not the low-flying fruit, and build on available models. I want to hit that point here in particular, where we can, how we can build on what exists. So it's not like let's come in and have a whole new European method that replace what everybody has in place, but try to manage them. But of course, that doesn't mean that if one country has 10 data spaces and the other one has 10, then we say now we've got 20 and we're all harmonized. I mean, it is a piece of work here. So if we go on to the next slide, and what we've done is we can go to the next slide. Actually, I'll just skip this. It's a lovely slide, but I'm going to skip it because I haven't got much time. So what we've really done now is that we've kicked off the work in a very detailed drafting approach for having this editorial group, this expert group, to develop advice for us on what we should include in the interoperability acts, implementing acts. That is due soon. It hasn't been finalized yet. At the same time, we are using the Digitalization of Energy Action Plan for some very specific questions for consultation on interoperability, on the kinds of issues that I've talked about here, or I mentioned. So we are in, the sausage machine is going. We hope to be able to adopt next year, using the comitology procedure, the first acts on metering and consumption data. So this is on its go, and this will be based on the recommendations in part from the expert group, but also will build on the responses that we get in the consultation. So again, as well as responding to the Digitalization of Energy Action Plan consultation, look at the specific questions that we have here, and we can just and then. So that brings me back to what does this do? Well, actually, and here I'll tell you to all read the consultation, sorry, the communication from today, because it actually specifically mentions these implementing acts as being something that we will build on when we study the idea of having more integrated retail markets. Which, as I said, if we actually think around where it is we want to go about having empowered consumers with business models and approaches that can apply in different countries, well, these are going to be one of the tools that we need to use. Mm-hmm. So I know I've gone probably slightly over time, and I apologize. So with that, I will wrap up. And I look forward to even more interesting presentations from the colleagues, which I've seen some of already, and I really look forward to it. And thank you very much for having me and allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Tarek. This was excellent. I think a very good overview, right, about the different, obviously the different topics that are definitely on the table, right, and that would be exactly the ones that would ensure that we would have, a set of implementation acts that would ensure that, the directions are on the field, right, that, in particular, I think the different member states would start adopting, right, a set of directives, a set of measures, right, that would be really the ones that would take us forward in energy transition, and also obviously ensuring the access to energy data, which is really, I think, the key ingredient, right, for energy transition, as we know. So I don't think I see any question here, so therefore I could maybe accommodate one very quick, but we are a bit over the time indeed. So I would immediately move over, right, to the different presentations that we have prepared here. And obviously I would like to introduce our next speaker, Anne. I see you there. Thank you so much for making it. And I would just make a very quick introduction. Anne Kohler has been an expert for the gas market and sales topics at BNE since 2007. Since 2018, she has been responsible for topics in digitalization in the energy transition, and she's also working on the association's positions on hydrogen in climate policy. So I would really like to welcome Anne. So she's Director of Gas Markets, Decarbonization and Digital Affairs at BNE. Thank you so much, Anne, for coming over and sharing with us your perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel, for the introduction, and hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I want to use my time slot to share some of our experience with the implementation of a framework for digitization and the procedure. The main focus for our association is digitization provides data and information and functions which are necessary to realize new and innovative business models to support the energy transition. Before I go on some examples with some learnings, I want to make two remarks on our framework. We have legal framework for digitization in Germany since 2016, and over 16 years the introduction of a smart meter had been planned, and the legislation gives very detailed which consumers or producers has to be equipped with the smart meters. It's much more important how the system has to be constructed, which roles act in which way together, and which how the system has to be built by manufacturers, and how the smart meters has to be used in different use cases. And on this basis, all the manufacturers have constructed their smart meter systems, and they have to certified by the BSI, or the BSI is the Federal Office for Information Security in Germany. Just as a short background. Next slide, please. One aim of one of the first aims with the introduction of smart meters was to allow the provision of dynamic pricing contracts for customers, and smart meter systems are essential to realize such contracts with different requirements. How is the situation actually in Germany? Over the last monitoring, we saw only 2 suppliers who offered dynamic price models, and the European the provision from Article 11 from the European Electricity Directive had been implemented in August this year. But also with this delay in the regulatory framework, we also see the technical requirements are not met until now, because we have no BSE certified smart meter systems which support those functions, and you can use also other not non-certified smart meter systems, but it has other challenges. The acceptance of dynamic pricing contract is very low at the moment. And we have also another problem that the data provision regulation sees the only has a time lag in data provision because the 50 minutes load profile will be provided on the following day. This is too late for real time pricing, and because real-time pricing and other dynamic pricing models need real-time data. So there we see some improvements which should be made. One of the first thing is the define real data provision for supplier and balancing as a standard solution. We have to accelerate the smart meter rollout in Germany with the measure problems. We have to reduce the complexity in the process and allow more pragmatic solutions. And we have to facilitate also regulation on grandfathering for the use of non-certified smart meters. So the consumers could also choose the existing smart meter systems without any problem. Next slide, please. The smart meters should all have been introduced to provide also better information about actual consumption and to promote energy efficiency aims. And we see the smart meter data, smart meter offers information which allows, for example, a monthly energy invoice, and in some very few but selected offers in the market also a data visualization in real time, so the consumer could monitor its own devices at home and monitor the costs then. But this function could be very attractive to some of customers, but it's not a solution for all customers. And we see there is a lack of affordable digital meter, which only comes with some basic functions and that allow a remote reading by the operator, and just to realize the offer of the monthly energy invoice for the customer. Next slide, please. Smart meter systems are also very important for the integration of renewable energy installations and their local production and storage. Today we have the situation that smaller installations and battery storage, there's a lack of real-time data. Consumers are we have about 50 million consumption points in Germany, only metered once a year, and we see a lot of larger loads such EMO charging points for e-mobility, e-mobiles and e-heating systems and the systems. The existing technologies for metering and remote controlling such systems are very expensive for those smaller installations. They only allow a lump sum reduction, for example. They don't give any feedback how the signals had been implemented, and only 1/3 of those of the technology really works. So the smart meter systems are here very much needed. Next slide, please. And we also see a trend of the German government to widen the group of obligated customers who had to where a smart meter system had to be installed. And though the German Renewable Act redefined smart meter equipment obligations last year for new installations. Since now the mandatory use of smart meter for remote control and accessing the feed-in data for smaller installations. But this regulation applies only if we have the smart meter systems which cover those functions, and this hadn't been done yet. I have also here the problem that the data provision comes with a time lag. We have the same problem as before. The 50-minute profiles will be provided on the following day, and this is too late. We see also some of the standardization procedures have in conflict with the provision of balancing services. So we have to adjust the regulation in this field. In Germany, also here, real-time data had to be defined as a standard. We have to accelerate the smart meter road, our biggest challenge. For example, by defining a minimum requirements instead of regulating every detail of architecture. And last but not least, we need a standardization of the communication protocols to transmit signals to the metering operator. Next slide, please. Using flexibility in distribution networks is one of the most important use cases for digitization, and we see smart meters allow the integration of e-mobility and other new loads. We see the chance by using digitization to avoiding or reducing congestions and avoid reducing grid extensions. Next slide, please. How is the situation today in Germany? I got here some numbers. The incentives to use flexibility in the distribution network. Today, there's no market-based procedure implemented, and the existing interrupter loads have under very individual, non-harmonized regulation. We see also energy procurement is still based on standard load profiles in the existing framework. So we need a new framework. Next slide, please. And we see also that the technology used for metering and remote control is very old technology, or there's no technology used to control the loads. For example, in the case of e-mobility, we see more of half of the connection points, there's no load control installed. On the next slide, please. We in the last year we also the German government tried to introduce a legislative proposal to limit the network load, and this proposal had very problematic issues from a market perspective, because it contained a far-reaching rights for the intervention of distribution system operators to limit in the loads from heat pumps, charging devices, and battery storage. And this, the planned regulation would have made it very difficult to sell the remaining flexibility to market. We also so there are no connection with the supply of volatile renewables feed in the distribution network. The regulation was only formal voluntary, but not really voluntary, because if someone would, didn't want to participate, he would have been penalized with very high grid fees. Also, the technical requirements for remote control is still missing. And we saw no obligation for DSO to introduce network monitoring systems to predict their cutoffs. Luckily for us, for the market, the government had withdrawn this proposal, and until now, Article 32 of the Electricity Directive is not completely implemented in Germany now. What could we have learned from this situation? We also there's no smart grid without intelligent network condition monitoring by DSO. This is very important, I think. So one of that's why we say implementation of network condition monitoring must be a precondition for load cutting by DSO. And also here we see the need for acceleration of smart meter rollout and a change in the definition of real-time data provision. Last slide, please, for me. Just to sum up our proposed solutions to fix some of the problems, to ensure a better equipment with powerful smart meter and improve the access to energy data, which would allow innovative services. Acceleration of smart meter rollout systems is the biggest topic. Our proposal is to define by only a minimum requirements on data protection and cybersecurity, and in the regulation, and on the other hand, allowing pragmatic solutions which have been already now done. We need a new definition of real-time data provision as the standard services for the effective macro role. And bundling is also an effective bundling is still very important, because we see the time lag in data provision is only a problem for retailers. It's not a problem until now for integrated energy companies, because they have all the rules in the companies, and we get the data earlier. We need a new solutions for grandfathering that powerful non-certified smart meter systems could be longer used. And it's also necessary to introduce affordable digital meter systems with some basic functions. For a big group of consumers, the more expensive smart meter system with a lot of functions are too big and too expensive. And last but not least, the implementation of network condition monitoring of the requisite for load coupling in the smart grid. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Anne. And I see that there is at least already one question that came for you. I think we will cover that later on in our Q&A session. So with that, I would move on to our next speaker, which is Marion Malachos from SmartN. Marion, if you are there. And I would quickly introduce you, Marion. Thank you so much for making it today. So Marion Malachos, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is Policy Manager at SmartAN, the European Business Association for Digital and Decentralized Energy Solutions. She is also the coordinator of SmartN's Digital Agenda Task Force. And prior to joining SmartN, she has been working 7 years as policy officer in the retail market unit and the DG Energy in the European Commission, in particular on consumer engagement and energy communities. Marion, thank you so much for making it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for your invitation. Thank you, everyone, for the nice presentation already ahead. So very quickly, so that everyone knows who SmartN is. So as you said, SmartN represents digital and decentralized consumer-driven solutions. So we provide flexibility services to the energy system, electromobility services. We promote smart buildings as well. We have a wide range of members, which include service providers, aggregators, and as I said, e-mobility companies, all advanced to all coming together to advance demand-side flexibility in Europe. In the next slide, you can see that what we strive for is indeed for the activation of demand-side flexibility, which for us is key to make every company, every car, every building, so basically empower all end users, all consumers, and make them able to support a more variable energy system. And for that, indeed, demand-side flexibility is key. In the next slide, please, we'll see that indeed demand-side flexibility is a core element that we see as a core solution to reaching climate neutrality. This was also mentioned by TAG on what we are aiming at EU level. And of course, climate neutrality is a must, and there's obvious reasons for that. The most recent ones as well relates to the electricity price hikes that we see, and climate neutrality could be also a solution for that. Today, of course, when we want to reach climate neutrality, the challenge today is no longer about scaling up renewables. I mean, this was the easy part, let's say, of the energy transition. Now it's really about running an efficient energy system that is able to integrate this increasing share of variable renewable energy. And for that, we need a smart and clean electrification and integration of all end-use sectors. And I'm happy also, and that of course requires consumers' empowerment. And I'm happy to hear also the Commission sharing and striving for this objective as well. So next slide, please. Concretely, what does it mean? It means that all European energy end users, so business, citizens, they hold the key for reaching climate neutrality. And the activation of demand-side flexibility is really behind all that. So we have already the electricity market design, which sets rule for the participation of demand-side flexibility in the electricity market. But of course, the implementation is a lengthy process. This was also discussed by Anne, where we see that still some barriers exist. But we need, so first and foremost, we need a proper implementation of the electricity market design. But we also need to complement the electricity market design to make sure that we have demand-side flexibility in the first place. And for that, we see the Fit for 55 package as an excellent opportunity to really complement and build on the electricity market design. So first of all, to make sure that we can transform buildings, industries, and transport into flexible assets, and to also have incentives to activate their demand-side flexibility potentials that has been created. And so how to ensure that we have the demand-side flexibility potential? So we need the technologies to do that. And demand-side flexibility can come from several types of decentralized energy resources. So we have the controllable loads, we have the storage devices, we have small-scale renewable generation. But what is important is that all of these decentralized energy resources are digitally connected among themselves. So that's where the digitalization comes into play in support of the demand-side flexibility. So they need to be connected, digitally connected among themselves, but also with the surrounding system, so that they are able to adjust their consumption or production automatically in reaction to external signal from the system. So data-driven energy services, such as demand response or aggregation, can really support the smart integration of all these end-user sectors and of all these behind-the-meters assets as well, and make sure that they are all integrated with the electricity markets. In the next slide, I think it's important to really highlight what are the benefits of a consumer-centric system. So there are many benefits to it, both for the system and for the consumers themselves. So for the system, and especially now that we see a need to ensure system efficiency, I think it's very important to highlight that. With the activation of demand-side flexibility, we can optimize the energy system, make sure that we have less network constraint, which will then also reduce the need for costly grid reinforcement and avoid then stranded assets. And this was already estimated by the Commission already way back in 2016, when it was doing its impact assessment for the clean energy package, that there could be up to 5 billion a year of avoided investment in grid reinforcement and expansion every year by 2030, just by activating demand response and demand-side flexibility. And of course, this supports as well a cost-effective penetration of renewable energy sources. But there is, on the other side, also strong benefits for the consumers. It allows them to really minimize their home energy costs. For when it comes to e-mobility, they can charge with renewable electricity. But what we see here today is that very few system operators use residential flexibility in their day-to-day optimization and operations. So, but we see that there is a need to move quickly on that and to make sure of this demand-side flexibility potential from residential end users as well. First of all, because by 2050, about 83% of EU households will contribute to renewable energy production, demand response, and energy storage. So there is a huge potential of demand-side flexibility that needs to be untapped. And we also have new technologies that really are coming to the homes right now with some photovoltaic smart and linked to smart charging as well, that really are coming into the homes and that we could really benefit from. And in the next slide, sorry, but unfortunately, this isn't sufficiently developed. And the reason why it does not develop fast enough, it's also because there is a lack of standardized access to data. And I'm glad also to hear from the Commission that this is something that they're looking into. But what we need is really to make sure that this data access is across the entire energy system. Because data is key for prosumer business models that allow and support consumer empowerment. These prosumer business models, with this data, they know when to activate demand-side flexibility. They know when it is best for the consumers and when it is best for the system. So that will also support rewards opportunity for consumers. So data access is indeed needed regarding prosumers data, but also grid and market data. And the key question here is really how to interconnect all the layers of the energy systems and how to make sure that we can enable flexibility from the bottom up to the system. And for that, we think it's very key to have a European energy data space as well. And so we need to interconnect all of the layers. From the bottom, we need to have technology rollouts, to have smart assets. We need to make sure that the grid edge solutions are also interoperable, based on open format, for instance. So in this way, and so they need to be interoperable among themselves, but also with the energy system. So then in that sense, these grid edge solutions are not standalone assets, but really they are integrated assets providing flexibility to the system. And so in that regard, we need access to smart meter data, but we also need access to sub-meter data and interoperability of sub-meters data. So I think this is also a priority that the upcoming implementing acts, particularly the implementing act on interoperability of demand response data, should be looking at, because sub-meters data are really key for activating both implicit, so price-driven flexibility, and explicit flexibility, which with the participation of incentives and flexibility schemes. So the data exchange between the different layers of the ecosystems needs to be also addressed and eased. So that, of course, needs to be supported through interoperability. The key focus really of this digital ecosystem that we see is really to ensure data portability, data exchange through interoperability, and of course, another important principle is indeed to ensure cybersecurity, and because this is obviously key if you want to also foster consumers' trusts and participation also in this clean energy transition challenge as well. So very last slide, and very quickly, because I see that we are also running out of time, so I try to speed up a bit my presentation. As you mentioned, I'm coordinating the digital agenda task force within SmartN, and because we decided that it was very important to also have a holistic overview of all the different files that are taking place, and trying to link and make the bridge between the clean energy transition, the Green Deal objective, but also the digitalization priorities as well. So we have identified 3 priorities that are important to look at. So the prosumers data, grids and market data, which relates to access to data related to that are coming from the grid operators, and that are needed also to know when to activate demand side flexibility when it is best for the system. And of course, cybersecurity is key, because as we are moving to more decentralized energy systems with more distributed energy resources connected and digitally connected, we also need to be addressing the cybersecurity risks that may come from them as well. So for us, the 3, let's say, priority areas really need to be tackled. They are core elements of the European Common Data Space. And they are all linked to ongoing priorities. And I'm happy also to say that through this work, SmartN is also part of the expert group, one on interoperability of data, the drafting committee of cybersecurity, and also through ETISNet. So we're also quite involved in this topic. I'm happy to take further questions afterward. I hope the presentation was not too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marian. And I'm guessing that SmartN eventually is the most flexible association in the energy world in the European Union. So thank you so much for this. Antonio, back to you. Thank you so much for giving us also the perspectives right from the European Energy Retailers Association. Thank you very much.
Okay, and when do you need me to finish? Because we need some time for the questions, no?
Yes, indeed, right? So if you can really make it within 10 minutes or less, that would be great.
Okay, great. No, I'll do it. Okay, so thank you very much. Well, first give you a little insight about what is ER, and I think it covers a lot of, it's important now that we were speaking, and also because of the presentations we had. At the end, we are the European Energy Retailers, a network that well, it represents more than like hundreds of retailers throughout Europe, no, in different countries, and it's been a quite a nice path to come, because I mean, we really needed to bring the voice of the retailer and the supplier not to the table, in the sense that at the end of the day, for all these things, even for data and even for measures we're seeing now, it's the retailer who's the last mile to the consumer and who's explaining him everything. No, and so now when we're seeing these measures, no, that were appearing today, in some countries there have already been measures. So, for example, if the government decides to reduce VAT, it's the retailer who's going to go to the consumer, show him that, who's going to change his system, and who's going to go there. And also, when we're in the middle and when now prices go up, a lot of millions of customers throughout Europe are not suffering this because they had a fixed price with their supplier, and it's the supplier managing the risk. And also, we're giving liquidity to the system, and somehow, no, and a lot of times, no, it's pretty interesting to try to think on it, because we feel sometimes that the supplier is out of the equation in a lot of things. No, like for example, with the VAT, we suffered. For example, in Spain, there was a reduction of VAT, but the VAT was reduced to the consumer, not to the retailer. So we are now charging 10% and paying 21% and things like that. No, and it was fun to me. That I'm telling you because I was seeing the architecture of Marion, no, and then maybe we have time to debate, or if not today, further on. And you see the different layers, and you don't see the supplier retailer in all the layers. Like, well, but we're also there. Hello, no, sometimes. But it's something typical. It's not only Marion. It's something that happens a lot of times. So it's very important to understand that at the end of the day, it's the supplier who's going to give the info to the customer, who's going to be with him, who's going to show him the measures and this thing. No, and with this context, we can go to the next slide, because it's when what we see from the consumer. It's, well, this picture. No, we did this picture about the big difference there is between what the consumer gives to the system nowadays, especially with smart meters, and what he receives from the system. No, and so the consumer at the end has his smart meters giving all that timely measure with, you're able to operate them, no, the real-time capabilities. They have hourly load curves, they have remote management, you can have instant consumption in a lot of points throughout Europe where smart meters are available. Then those profiles go to the system operator that has very complex algorithms to balance the system with big databases of thousands and thousands of millions of data, no, that allows to design the network for peaks. This comes to the market settlement, where also there are all the imbalances processes that are hourly, but they're going to be 15 minutes. So quarterly, settle all the balances with all profiles and so. And at the end of the day, that comes to the consumer, no, in 10 euros a month, no, or 35 euros a month. In a lot of cases, he's not able to see more than total consumption and price. And even in some countries, not even the real consumption throughout a lot time. No? So this is something we really have to think on. No? It's, I mean, it's totally asymmetric. That's why the consumer, it's, I mean, probably a lot of the consumers are in their houses now. If they didn't read the press, they wouldn't even realize the prices are going up or they're having any issue. You know, they're there with their coffee, watching television, but because they're giving much more from the system, and the system a lot of times, and when we see legislation, is thinking that the consumer is not able to do nothing. No? And so we're not giving him tools, because look, give us the info and let all the system operators and the market operators and let the system work, and you just relax. You cannot do a lot of things. No, so it's quite asymmetric. No, the information we have between what he gives to the system, that it's all openness, and what he's receiving now. No, and that's something we have to change. We go to the next slide. So for sure, what we're speaking now is that this information of the smart meters has to come to the consumers in some way, no? And it has to start reaching them. They have to be aware of what they're consuming, when, why. Probably a lot of them don't know what is their machine that is consuming most throughout the day. Probably if you ask them, they're going to say one dishwasher, and probably it's the fridge in a lot of cases, and they don't even know. They don't have access to the profile. No, and it's true that the articles of the directive, no, define already a framework to establish this interoperability, this data access protocol that must be in place. And well, Tadek was also explaining about the expert group 1, where they have defined already a lot of things. Our view is that the best way to share this type of things is through an integrated data hub that integrates all the information of all the, but it has to be managed by independent party. So our expertise comes to say that, okay, it's not only fixing the protocols and what to implement and so, but it's also very important who does it and who owns it, no? Because then in the long term, a lot of the issues we find in the market is about having incumbents in both sides of the equation, and then this brings problems because a lot of consumers, even though there is no problems in the system, they understand that if they were in the incumbent, then the info will be better than if they are not, and so no. And this is a big problem, and it makes consumers feel that they are captive with one company and they cannot move and they cannot foster. No? And actually, I was glad to see that in the measures. I had the opportunity to read a little bit about the communication there was, and well, there was a lot of things referring to the supplier and the customer empowerment, and we were seeing also with Tadek, no, customer empowerment, and also about retailers needing to help small retailers for that liquidity in the market, and so to foster competition and show consumers they can change, they can think on their price. There's options out there, no? And as we said at the beginning, okay, there's option in price, but also a good retailer, a good supplier is going to help you on your consumption, and for that he needs the information, no? And well, we bring here a little example about in Spain, actually before, no? So the value of data is so much for the future. We're a data-driven society, and it's so much that even though we didn't have implemented any directives still in Spain, the DSOs decided to create their own data hub, integrated data hub, with no legislation covering it, just because they saw that, I mean, that position has to be something very crucial, not for the future, no? We go to the next slide. And this comes to the webinar we did last year, also in the utility week. And well, we did the question to who should not be the one having the ownership of this. And for sure, it's always between the DSOs, that is the traditional selected party. But also, if you see, there was a lot of people thinking, well, maybe it should be the national regulatory authority, like an independent party, or another regulated metering system operator that is independent, or just leave it to the market. I mean, in a digital world, if you're connecting this devices, it could be, yes, who is the best digital service provider? It doesn't have to be, I mean, a big network of people reading meters. Now it's just an IT system, huge IT system, but it's one IT system that you can change from one place to another and have an independent party manage it. And so, as a conclusion, in the next slide, we would say, well, I think we're all agree now here that consumer empowerment comes through balancing between demand, renewable generation. This implies it's a data-driven engagement, so consumers have to understand the data, they have to have it, okay? This implies that we have to create the system, and it's not only about what are the protocols, but who owns that system and who's going to manage it in the long term. And it's important to look for that independent party that can be the owner, and it's a new type of role we have. And the good part I see is that in the EG1, in that expert group 1, it's not only that they were defining different roles, and there was a role for DSOs, there was a role for supplier that is different, there was a role for the owner of the meter, and a role for the guy that is metering it, and the one that's having the data hub. So maybe it doesn't have to be the same company all the time. It's not a supplier being owner of the data. It's not the DSO. Maybe we should build somebody that is the metering operator, gets the info timely and sends it to all market participants at the same time. No? And we avoid a lot of issues that we do have in Spain, for example, where a consumer can know much more info calling his DSO than calling his supplier. That is something very weird, no? And so it's important we develop this, because at the end, smart meters, no, we have their statement, smart meters are not smart if they don't send the info. And the problem is that asymmetry, not the end. We do have a huge infrastructure. We've invest a lot of money on building a huge infrastructure throughout Europe of smart meters to make one invoice a month. And that's absurd for the consumer. Okay, yeah, then you have the balancing system. That has a lot of info. But the consumer says, look, why you did all this? And why we waste so much money just to make one invoice a month and tell me that this month I consume 100 kilowatts hour, instead of telling me hour by hour, minute by minute. No, what am I able to do? Which is the equipment that is eating more energy? If my retrofit I did on my facilities is really being useful in what hours, and so on. So we need smart meters to really deploy all that info, and that's the only way that consumers are going to be empowered. They're going to start not thinking so much on price. That, as we said, that has some optimization, 5, 10%, 50%, and start thinking the consumption where they can save 40, 50, 60%, or not even save, but even help the system, with the flexibility that Marian was saying, giving flexibility to the system. And it's much more cheaper to stop consuming some energy that activate a fossil fuel plant to give that peak power. So well, I think we all agree here that data is key, and let's see how the questions go. Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much, Antonio. And thank you also, Anna and Marian. So I do have a couple of questions maybe, but anyway, I would definitely like to start asking your question to Marian, which is exactly, Marian, where is the retailer in your picture?
Absolutely.
Sorry, but I started, oh my God.
No, and we discussed it when preparing the call, but I thought I would leave it that way just to be able to have an engaged discussion on that. So absolutely, you're part of this picture, because if you see on that, so we have the market participants platform, and of course that's where the suppliers are. And there we wanted to focus on the balanced responsible parties, but that's also where we see a role for suppliers and making the interlinkages with the system operators, the consumers, and they're being integrated in the market as market participants there as well. So they're definitely there. They're a key and central element where all of the other actors, including the aggregators, need to be interacting here again as well.
I was just using the slide to put the context. I know. Thank you, Maya.
Very good. And, I would also ask you one question, which is a bit a personal question. I think you touched on a topic that my Esmig colleagues, they know that I'm also very passionate about, which is, obviously you said it right, we do all these sophisticated calculations and data processing routines, but in many countries and market member states, right, what we see is that the energy settlement process takes place on basis of standard profiles. As of today, Antonio, if you think about the member states, this 26, right, how many of them are still doing settlement based on standard profiles, and how many are already on real consumption profiles? Do you have an estimate on that?
Well, I don't have a lot. I know Spain is Spain is one of the only ones that is doing it on real profiles for domestic consumption. No, I think fully for the 98, because in Spain it's DSO saw the opportunity of putting the smart meters and using them so as such an asset for the future, that deployment of smart meters was very successful and very fast. And I think it could be, I don't know if it's not only Spain, it's going to be one or two more. I know Germany is not. No, Anne knows that.
Not really.
And I think Spain could be one of the only ones that are doing it as a large country, with 40 million people doing it with a real profile. I don't know if somebody in the crowd knows. No, my country also. But I think from who I speak with, I think it's Spain mainly, the one that is doing it.
Very good, and obviously, good to get exactly some information from the attendees, because that is also my perception, Antonio, that Spain is a bit an exceptional case in the entire European landscape. I would move on then to a couple of questions that we have received, and the first one would go to you, Anne. Let me see if I can phrase it well. It came from Guillaume Magnier, and the question would be, if according to you, right, the energy services should be created only using data coming from smart meters, or do you think that smart meters are only part of the solution, and then that we could also put together other sensors, right, and elements that would be collecting data and energy data, understand, so that it would be a best way to create a variety of business approaches there?
My answer would be smart meters play an important role to provide data, but there could be also other sources of data which could be and should be considered in the model to provide energy data. Yes. For some use cases, it would be easier to use other digital technologies to provide the data.
Very good, thank you. And then another question here then to Marion, I think also from Guillaume, asking whether these costs of implementing all these recommendations, right, defining real-time data provision, standard services, if they have been computed, right, and if it would be less expensive to let the energy suppliers just taking this over, right, installing dedicated devices whatsoever, or what could be other alternatives that we could have here in terms of optimizing the overall cost of the system.
Well, first of all, what we need also to take into account is then with these devices, with all of them digitally connected, we optimize the system in a cost-effective way. So there is also a return on investment there as well that needs to be taken into account. And I can invite you to one of our study, which is a Q&A paper on flexible buildings that Martin has developed, and where we address that specifically, for instance, for the building sectors. That we can probably share the link on that as well.
Okay, but in terms of the concrete question, whether this is calculated implementation of the cost of implementing such systems, do we have any kind of high-level figure about what it means to implement several of these recommendations?
No, we haven't computed these costs, but what we should know as well is that these data, for an important part of them, they are available to the system operators. So what we need also is to make sure that third parties can access that. So it's not creating an additional cost per se to the overall system, because these data are there, they are generated, they are being centralized, but we need also to have a third party access as well.
Very good. And Marian, sorry, just to ask you that one, right? That's also a bit coming here from Antonio. Do you share with these concerns that, there have been, I would say, considerable investments already done in infrastructure and smart technologies, but somehow, limited results and outcomes so far?
Yes, well, I would qualify a little bit. I see that most of the investments are related to the infrastructure, yes, but the grid expansion, grid reinforcement, and I think that there is a risk of having stranded assets there, definitely, that we should address. So that's why when we have the network planning development, we really need to have a cost-benefit analysis based on a methodology that truly valorizes demand-side flexibility. And I see that there is some willingness to go into that directions with the energy efficiency first application, first principle recommendation and guidelines. So I would definitely encourage to take that route there as well.
Very good. So a question to you, Antonio, right? And I have another one prepared here for Tag, maybe probably to close. So you said, right, that smart meter is not a smart meter, or the smart meters that we have implemented are many times not smart meters. How do we deal with the fact that smart meters are installed now for 15, 20 years and services can evolve much faster than technology, right? How do we synchronize the deployment of smart meters and innovative services?
Well, I understand that the question that, it's something we had some debate also throughout Spain, like, hey, we deployed all this infrastructure with hourly curves and suddenly we want to go 15 minutes and what are we going to do? But the good thing of smart meters that they are measuring instant power. So you are able to integrate it as much as you want. You can do it every 3 seconds, 6 seconds. It's just a matter of having enough network to grow with it. Probably the only thing that you can act over them, but you cannot just modulate consumption. So you can say yes, no, but not say no. Go to half of your power demand. That's the only thing that the smart meters were deploying. But also, when we're going to think on flexibility, as Marion was saying, in for example, we as a retailer, we have in Spain the same capacity of flexibility than a combined cycle of 400 megawatts, because we have 400,000 dishwashers that we could stop at any moment if the system needs it. But to stop that, the meter is not going to be enough. So the meter can give us the info of the capacity we have. With a smart meter, we are able to understand the sub-metering even. So with profiles and with artificial intelligence, we are able to, from the secondary curve, from our curve, real-time curve, understand what's being activated, what's being turned off, because there are a lot of profiles about how a dishwasher, how a washing machine, how the different appliances of a house work. And it gives us enough information for the starting point. Probably the only thing you're not able to do is to then operate on them, but they can adapt for the near future. The only thing I see there also is it's also important. So we develop a lot of hardware. Now software is the debate. We were speaking, hey, yeah, but if you put the hardware, but you don't have the software. The only point for me that it's critical, in Spain we have a bad experience with this, is that the technology where it is built on, it could be non-competitive. So in Spain, it's built over power line connection. So you cannot connect to it without not going through the network of the DSO. And DSOs cannot open their network because of security issues. So the technology chosen to develop this is a barrier for competition, clear barrier for competition, because either you deploy again all the smart meters with internet access direct, machine to machine connection, or you're always going to have the legacy of the power line connection to connect. And so probably for me, that's the biggest barrier now to adapt to all the new services and new in Spain. In other countries, probably they take a decision to connect them directly by machine to machine, or other ways to connect to the internet, not through the DSO line. That could open much more possibilities for the future.
Very good. So then, thank you so much for that, Antonio. I would maybe ask a bit, obviously maybe a slightly provocative question to you, Tag, if you don't mind, a bit to the end, right? Which is, obviously I was thinking right into the presentations that we have seen, the discussions we are having, and I was thinking, well, if we would have had this session back in, 10 years ago, right, in 2011, right, and versus today, what we have seen as, I would say, developments, I think we would definitely agree that renewables, they've exploded. They are everywhere. If we go to Germany, Anna, right, we see solar panels everywhere, right? We definitely, I think we see very large deployments, right, of smart meters in many member states. But, to the topic of this session here, right, which is access to the energy data, it does not look like things changed a lot in the last 10 years. Like, is this a fair statement? Or do you think, no, this is something there where we have seen already considerable developments if we think the situation 10 years ago, 2011 and 2021 now? I guess you're muted.
As we come to the end here, I'm going to maybe take us a minute, 30 seconds over, sorry. So 10 years ago, we had just adopted, actually it was in September of 2011 that the third package came into force. We had the first European provisions on smart meters. I remember having conversations even before that, and you talk about, when I first began to understand what we were talking about here with profiles and how, I remember being quite shocked when I understood, well, first of all, the reconciliation time for suppliers between and wholesalers and what was happening in the market, and the reconciliations and the profiles and what was happening beneath everything. I remember being quite, it's quite a thing. So then what I hear slightly is, well, actually, lots of things have changed. We've got, and certainly in the legislative framework, we have a bigger legislative framework. I don't think that's really the question. Part of what I'm saying and hearing is like the old joke, I think it was from Paul Samuelson, when he said, look, I can see computers everywhere except in the productivity data. He said it in the 80s. And then in the 90s, boom, we had a huge productivity boom that was driven by computers. So I think here we are possibly, just for this, possibly in a similar position. I think, there's several ways to look at that. I mean, I want to commend. I took the presentations I got today from everybody I saw today. I really found them extremely useful. And it's always good when you learn something new at a conference, and it's also very good when you start to think, well, actually, now I want to talk about this. I want to understand exactly why people are still using profiles. I want to see what's their plan for getting rid of it, because clearly there's a whole series of demand response issues that don't make sense if you're still working off profiles. But hopefully we're moving beyond that. Let's just leave it at that. There's things I want to understand. There's issues I want to understand that Anna was talking about in Germany. That just to understand where it's coming from and how that's working. So now what I'm saying is, so where are we? I think we are massively advanced in many ways, but we have been laying foundations maybe for quite some time. So we have delivered a liberalization that is in some ways based on the older model of, well, it's all profiles and you come in and you do that. And at the same time, we have started the framework for having something that can go beyond it. And that's necessary if we want to, I think it was Marion who talked about it, about this idea that we're really changing the entire system. That's where we stand now. And between the legislative framework and the rollout of smart meters, that we'll begin to really think about how we do these business case models. Some of them will, and something I thought of, again, going through, sometimes you need all you need is how much was consumed at a particular point in time, and you need that data accurately. For the rest of it, I think Antonio was going to that, we can estimate how the controls don't have to be exactly the same for what's happening at a sub-metering level or happening behind the meter. But it's about you need a way that they can communicate with each other. There's lots of questions and lots of things that we still have to continue to think about. But I think we have really laid foundations, and we've laid foundations that will hopefully allow the services that we want to see emerge, be that from the types of independent suppliers that are represented today, new people like people that Marion is representing, or dare I say it, the incumbents. Maybe they can get their act together and also offer these services just like you can. So I think that's the thing. We've created a space now for a competitive process to emerge where people will want to do that. We will have to continue to look at the important points that were raised around unbundling, around what that means, around a fair process for competition. But I think we are getting there. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, Miguel. Yeah. And maybe let's hope that we get the kind of boom that we saw in the use of computers, that we can now start applying it here.
Absolutely. I think those are very good points indeed. Thank you so much, Tag. So with this, I think we are a bit over time. I would like to thank everyone for coming over, for preparing your sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you to the attendees. Thank you also obviously for the questions raised. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.